This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free, complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201. Welcome to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, a ministry of hope, spiritual inspiration, personal power guided by Christian love. May the power of God's Holy Spirit fall upon you as you sit back and enjoy today's program. I introduce you now to Pastor Nicholas Hood III.
Today I want to talk about Gideon in the Bible from Judges chapter 6. I want to talk about lessons from the story of Gideon. And with me today are two members of my church who are medical professionals. We have Dr. Bobby Edwards, who's a dermatologist, and we have Dr. Rhonda White, who's an internal medicine doctor. And I'm so impressed with the two of them. And we're going to be back in just one moment, but I invite you to now, while we take a break, open up your Bible, flip to Judges chapter 6, and you'll be right there with me with the story of Gideon. We'll be right back.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free, complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
Again, this is Nick Hood, and with me are Dr. Bobby Edwards and Dr. Rhonda White, and they are medical professionals. Bobby Edwards, Dr. Bobby Edwards is a dermatologist. Dr. Rhonda White is an internal medicine doctor. And I asked them to join me today. I'm going to tell the story of Gideon from my perspective, and then we're going to bring it home, as we like to say in the church, and talk about, from a health perspective, what are some of the lessons we can learn from Gideon. And let me paint the picture for you. Gideon and the people of Israel are under the domination of the Midianites. And they go back and forth between being friendly and not friendly, but at this period they're not friendly. And the Midianites are dominating the Israelites. And it's so bad that when the Israelites would plant crops, the Midianites would wait till the crops would grow, and then they would swoop down and take all the crops with them. So they would grow wheat, and when it was time to harvest the wheat, the Midianites would just take it. You know, if they grew corn, if they grew, Brussels sprouts or beans or whatever, the Midianites would just wait for the plants to flower, to blossom, and then they would swoop down and just take them. And there was nothing the Israelites could do about it. It was so bad that we're told that Gideon, this is where the story begins in chapter 6 of Judges. Gideon is threshing wheat in the wine press. He's, you don't thresh wheat in the wine press. You press grapes in the wine press. But the wine press would have walls around it. And I can imagine Gideon sought out the wine press so the Midianites couldn't see what he was doing. And this is where the story begins. it's really bad. And an angel comes to Gideon and he says, rise up, O man of valor. God wants you to fight the Midianites and to liberate your people. And Gideon did what very often we do. He got smart with God. And he said, if God is for us, why has all this happened to us? If God really is with us, why are we living like this? Why am I threshing out wheat in a wine press? And the angel says, no, God really is calling you to do this. And Gideon replies to God, if God really wants me to do this, then I need a sign. And he said, I want to put a fleece, the fleece from a sheep, on the grass at night, and in the morning, I want the grass to be wet and I want the fleece to be dry. And sure enough, and the angel says, okay, it's on. And Gideon wakes up the next morning, and sure enough, the grass is wet, but the fleece is dry. And I can imagine the angel looking at Gideon saying, now, what do you have to say now? And Gideon says, well, I want one more test. And he said, this time, I won't put the fleece back on the ground, but I want the fleece to be wet and the ground to be dry. And, that's unheard of. He's raising the bar for God. And I think sometimes we do that. We raise the bar of expectation with God. And sure enough, the next morning, the fleece is wet, but the ground is dry. And so Gideon, at that point, realizes that God is really with him. And Gideon becomes a judge for the people. And at that time, before the Israelites had kings, they had a series of judges. And the judges are just common, ordinary people who call the men, mainly the fighting men, together, and they would fight on behalf of their fledgling nation. And that's what Gideon does. And to his surprise, maybe his surprise, he finds out that they're actually winning. And that's lesson number one. Maybe that's lesson number two. Lesson number one is it's okay to test God. Lesson number two, after you've tested God, and you start to do what God asks you to do, you may find out that you're actually stronger than you may have thought. I look at the two of you as young doctors. There may have been a point in your life where you looked at your life and said, I'm not sure I can be a doctor. I'm not sure I can make it through medical school. I'm not sure I can set up a practice. I'm not sure I can do all that's required of being a doctor. But here you are right now, like modern day Gideons. And so that's really the story of Gideon. And one of the things I've found in life, and I don't want to portray myself as a great fighter because I really have not fought very much. But some of the kids that I fought with when I was a child actually became my best friends. And if we didn't become friends, at least they left me alone because they realized that I would fight back. And now I'm a proponent of Jesus Christ and the gospel of peace. But, we all have to grow up somewhere. But that's our starting point for today. And I'm just curious from your perspectives as medical professionals, Dr. Edwards as a medical doctor, Dr. Rondé White, Dr. Edwards as a doctor of dermatology, and Dr. White as a primary care physician, internal medicine. What do you do as a doctor when you have a patient who comes to you and they say, I go to church, I give my tithes and offerings to church, I believe in God, but still I've come down with a disease of the skin or I've come down with cancer. What do you say to a person with that kind of mindset? And Dr. Edwards, I want to start with you. I'm going to be a gentleman. Start with ladies first.
Okay. For me, I pray with the patient.
You pray with them?
I do.
Really?
I
Right
do.
there in your office?
I do. I do.
Good for you.
I do. Because there are some questions that I can't answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm acutely aware of where my ability comes to an end. And I think that, at least for me, the only answer that they can get is going to come from God Himself. And so we stop right then. We say a prayer. If they need to cry or release in any other kind of way, I'll allow them to do that. And then I say, what I can do and what I think God has put me here for is to offer you the best treatment that I can. And so that's what we're going to do. And if there's anything else that I can do to support you, do it. I will do it. If you need to call me, talk to me, send me a message, a flare in the sky, whatever you need to do, I will be there.
And what happens typically when you, after you pray with a person?
I think I would say relief. I feel like I get they are thankful that we've had that moment, that I stopped long enough to just do that with them. I feel better. I feel like I've done what God wanted me to do in that moment. And so we just take the extra time. Generally, after all of the whatever the release is that has to happen has occurred, then we can have, go on into the technical conversation and decide what treatments we want. And, it generally brings us very close. I have a lot of patients that I'm very close to because
I
of
am
circumstances
really
like that.
impressed. I want to take a sidebar and ask you something. So when you feel that when the Spirit is telling you to offer a prayer for your patient, you just pray right on the spot.
Right on the spot.
You don't type into your computer and go to Chat GPT
Nope.
and ask Chat GPT to spit out a prayer for you.
Nope.
I'm taking a sidebar, but one of the members of the church told me the other day that he was in a meeting and nobody would pray. They said, is there a volunteer to pray? And this member of the church is becoming familiar with this artificial intelligence called ChatGPT. He
great.
typed in a prayer and he said, Nick, within 30 seconds, I had a prayer. And he said, I have it right here. He said, can I read it to you? And he read it. It was a beautiful prayer with all the flowery, rich language of prayer. And I said, and you read that to them? He said, yes. And I said, I had to tell you, that's an excellent prayer. But in your little medical office, I would imagine the examining room is not particularly big.
10 by 10.
10 by 10. You're in that examining room, and you don't have time to go to ChatGPT.
No.
You are praying right on the spot.
On the spot. I ask them first if it's okay. Pretty uniformly, they say yes. I say whatever comes to my heart, and it's usually pretty, low level. I'm not a great orator, as you are, Reverend Hood, but God always gives me the things to say.
That is
And
tremendous.
It turns out okay.
I am so impressed. Dr. Orande White, how about you? When you perceive that there's a patient in front of you who's just terrified and feels really overwhelmed, what are some of the techniques that you use to level them out, make them feel more calm?
Well, I usually find out, I usually let them express themselves as far as how they're feeling. And then I usually ask them, fill out, if I had something good to say or bad to say, would they want me to be direct, or we want to warm up to whatever we need to talk about. But I usually just sort of take things according to the patient's level of comfort and at their speed. But usually at some point I have to tell them, that there's something that, may not be what may be perceived as positive, as far as the situation is. And at that point, it sort of just depends on, it's a person by person situation, because as Dr. Edwards said, sometimes the patients don't want to pray, but sometimes they simply want to have somebody who's going to be supportive and let them talk and, just sort of go according to how, what their level of comfort is. But usually, obviously, you try to keep any anxiety down and as much as possible, and you just sort of deliver whatever news there is, if there's going to be some bad news that's going to have to be delivered. But
we've got to take a break, but we'll be right back. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more with the two of you about your perspective as medical professionals dealing with patients who feel overwhelmed. But friends, we'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Gideon story and a little bit more about medical science and how you can get the most value out of just seeing a doctor. We'll be right back in just a minute.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
Again, welcome back. I'm Nick Hood, and today we're talking about lessons from the story of Gideon, one of the judges of Israel in the Bible, Judges chapter 6. And with me are Dr. Bobby Edwards, a dermatologist, Dr. Rondé White, who is a primary care physician, internal medicine. Both are members of my church, and I'm very proud of you. This is a new ministry that I'm doing, and I've been trying to figure out how do I connect the church to this, and how do I connect this broadcast ministry to the church. And one of the things I've been doing is just inviting church members. We have so many really tremendous members with tremendous skill sets, just to share part of your own story. So again, Dr. Edwards, I want to come back to you with how can a patient get the most value from their doctor? Perhaps there's somebody looking at this program today who doesn't even go to a doctor. What can a patient do? And particularly if a person feels like there's something wrong in their body, what are some of the best things they can do to make the most out of their medical experience?
The thing that comes to mind immediately is to ask questions until you fully understand what your physician is saying to you. We are not always the best at explaining things and making sure that we're bringing the patient along, to a full understanding of whatever they're dealing with. And I think sometimes patients are, I guess I'm going to say bashful about really questioning the doctor. Hey, I don't understand that language, or can you tell me a little bit more about that diagnosis, or where can I go find some information? They just it's a lot to absorb in a 10 or 15 minute visit. And I think sometimes people just kind of miss the message and go home with more questions than they should have. And so I think that's the thing that comes to mind first. Make sure that you understand. And if you don't understand, stop your doctor, make your doctor explain it. And if they won't explain it, then you should probably seek maybe other medical care to make sure that you get a full explanation of what's going on with your body.
Dr. Rondé White, when you have a patient who's like Gideon, who's raising that question, if God is really for me, why has all this happened to me? What do you do to help that patient get the most out of their visit with you?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I do to help patients get the most out of their encounter with me is I try to allay whatever fears and anxieties they have first. Second is I like to express to the patient that I'm not a psychic and they shouldn't come in trying to test me. And what they should do, and what is very helpful for them to get the most out of their experience, is be very open and clear and not hide anything and not be bashful about this, that, or the other, because as a medical professional, you're doing this every day. This is what you do for a living. Over and over, you see patients. And there's pretty much nothing that they can tell you that you haven't heard of or that you're not prepared to deal with. But the issue is sometimes, as I've encountered over the years, especially as an internist, is many of patients come in and they and they sort of have like this attitude, like they expect you to sort of tell them what's wrong with them, like you're a psychic. But there's a reason why the history and physical process is the way that it is. And when you first of all, before you even go into the doctor's office, get the most out of a visit, you should really, have like a little list. Nothing, you don't have to write a bibliography or a biography, but just a list of what are your main symptoms and concerns. And you should state all of those fairly early in the visit. And then to answer questions the doctor has of you very directly and straightforward. And with clear communication and not holding back, not hiding anything, and having the expectation that the doctor is just gonna automatically know what's wrong with you without you sort of expressing what your experience has been and what has caused you to come to seek care. When patients do that, that's when they get the best results from seeing me, is when they let me know. No holds barred, no euphemisms, just very clearly exactly what they've been experiencing, exactly what's wrong, and just directly answering my questions. And with that, the clear communication and transparency, that's how you're going to make the best experience with your doctor. You're going to get the best results by doing that. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Edwards, back to the Gideon story, he puts God to the test. And as a dermatologist, medical professional, do you encourage your patients to test the medicines? I mean, if a person has named some of the diseases of the skin. We talked a week ago about leprosy. What is it, psoriasis?
Psoriasis.
And
eczema.
eczema. What are some of the other diseases of the skin?
There are low-grade skin cancers that we deal with. There's the inflammatory diseases, psoriasis, eczema, lichen planus. There's the more common conditions, acne, keloids, warts. It's a very long list.
So you got a long list.
Very long.
And very long list.
Yes.
And then I imagine there are different medicines that work better or worse, for a condition, a diagnosis that a person has. But once a person starts a prescribed medication, what do you do? I mean, what do you tell them to do? They check to see, is it working?
You mean as far as follow-up, or when they're or what they're going to do at home?
Yeah, what they do at home.
Yeah. So they test things all the time. It's normal. What my instruction versus what actually happens after the visit are often not in line. And so in the end, they have to be as on board with the plan as I am. So I allow a lot of latitude there. It's a little different in my specialty where the outcome of them not doing what I ask is generally not going to be a life-threatening situation like might be the case for Dr. White's practice. So I do allow some latitude there, and generally, you know, if it's something that's safe and they've done that and they come back and they say they did it some other kind of way and it didn't work, then I say, okay, now are you ready? Now are you ready? Now can we do it my way? Can we try it my way? And hopefully they'll get a better result. But you know, I try to, if I can explain enough of that at the beginning, then sometimes we can eliminate that step of them having to test. But some folks just, you know, that's how they want it, and okay.
Dr. White, we only have a minute or so, but you know, what are your thoughts about you know, when you prescribe a treatment plan for a patient, and they, I guess, start taking the medicine? Do you give them an out? Do you say, well, you know, if you have a bad reaction to this, call me or contact my office, or what does a person do?
Well, what I usually do is you say, you know, I'm going to prescribe this medicine, and what an important thing to do is to advise them these are the common side effects or things that may occur when you take this medicine. And then I advise them, yes, I give them an out, say, listen, if you really feel like you have some serious reaction or negative symptoms from taking this medicine, please call and let me know, and I will advise you further.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Rondé White and Dr. Bobby Edwards, I really want to thank the two of you for being with me. And you've added so much insight to the Gideon story. And, you know, last week we talked about the Moses story and the jealousy in the family. And before that, the 10 lepers and the one thankful leper. But all good things have to come to an end. And so we've got to wrap this up today. But thank you again, and I hope down the road the two of you might come back and be with me again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, folks, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope this program has been a blessing to you. It's certainly been a blessing to me. And, you know, if it's really meant something to you, call the number on the screen. Let us know what it means to you. If you want prayer, we'll pray for you. Remember, we also need your support. And I want to thank those who are beginning to support this ministry. And above all things, remember that I am praying for you. God bless and God keep you.
If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.